You know that feeling when you finally get something you've worked your ass off for? That first deep breath you take when you've crossed the finish line? For me, that was standing in the middle of my new apartment. Apartment 4B. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, brand new appliances, and that glorious new construction smell of fresh paint and possibility. After years of hustling, working fully remote as a medical transcriptionist, I'd finally saved enough to leave my dingy college town apartment and move to the city. This building was my trophy. It had a gym, a rooftop terrace, and a doorman named Frank, who looked like he could arm wrestle a bear. It was safe. It was clean. It was the start of my real adult life. My first week was a blur of unpacking boxes and ordering takeout. I hadn't met any of my neighbors yet. In a place like this, people mostly keep to themselves. That changed on Saturday. I was struggling to carry a ridiculously oversized ficus tree I'd bought, trying to jab the keycard at the lobby sensor with my elbow, when a voice behind me, smooth as silk, said, "Whoa there. Looks like you could use a hand." I turned, and honestly, it was like a guy from a cologne ad had walked off the page. He was tall, dressed in stylishly casual clothes, and had one of those effortlessly perfect smiles. "I'm Julian," he said, easily taking the pot from me. "I'm in 4A. Guess that makes us neighbors." "Chloe," I managed to say. "And thank you. This thing is heavier than it looks." "My pleasure," he said, holding the elevator door. "I'm a doctor over at St. Mary's. Mostly ER work, so I'm used to heavy lifting." Of course he was a doctor. He just had that air of calm, confident authority. He helped me get the tree into my apartment, and we chatted for a few minutes. He was charming, witty, and asked all the right questions. He made me feel instantly at ease. As he was leaving, he turned in the doorway. "Hey," he said, "the walls in this place are a little thin. I'm usually pretty quiet, but my girlfriend Sarah can be a bit boisterous when she's over. If we're ever too loud, just send me a text." Seriously, he gave me his number. I remember thinking it was the most considerate thing a neighbor had ever said to me. He was perfect. The apartment was perfect. My new life was perfect. It's almost funny, looking back, how wrong I was. The first incident happened about 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday night, just after 11. I was in bed, scrolling on my phone, when I started to hear them through my bedroom wall. Julian and, I assumed, Sarah. At first, it was just raised voices, the muffled, angry cadence of an argument. I couldn't make out the words, just the tones. His was a low, placating rumble. Hers was high-pitched and sharp. I put in my earbuds and tried to ignore it. It wasn't my business, but the fight escalated. Her voice got louder, more frantic. I took my earbuds out. I could hear distinct words now. "You promised," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You lied to me, you always lie." Then his voice, no longer calm. A sharp, guttural snarl. I heard a loud bang, like a fist hitting a wall. And then I heard her scream. It wasn't a long scream. It was short. A sudden, sharp intake of breath, and a cry of pain that was cut off with sickening abruptness. It was followed by a heavy, wet thud. A sound that didn't belong. A sound like a sack of potatoes being dropped. A heavy, dead weight. And then ... silence. Complete, total, deafening silence. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I lay there, frozen, straining my ears. The silence was worse than the shouting. It was unnatural. Minutes ticked by. Nothing. No door opening or closing. No more yelling. Just nothing. My mind was racing. Should I call the cops? What would I even say? I heard a noise. I sat up in bed, my hands shaking. I waited for what felt like an eternity. Finally, I convinced myself I was overreacting. They had a bad fight. She stormed out while I was overthinking it. It was fine. I eventually fell into a fitful, uneasy sleep. The next morning, I was a wreck. I couldn't focus on work. Every little creak in the building made me jump. Around noon, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there. I took a deep breath, walked out of my apartment, and knocked on the door of 4A. Julian answered, looking like he'd just stepped out of a magazine. He was wearing scrubs and sipping coffee. He smiled that perfect smile. "Chloe, hey, what's up?" "Hi," I said, my voice sounding weak. I'm so sorry to bother you, but is everything okay? I heard some shouting last night, and I just wanted to make sure." His smile faltered, replaced by a look of deep, sincere concern. But the concern wasn't for himself. It was for me. "Oh, Chloe. God, I am so sorry," he said, his voice full of practiced empathy. "You must think I'm a terrible neighbor." I was watching a movie, one of those intense psychological thrillers. I had the sound system cranked up way too loud. I should have been more considerate. "Did it keep you up?" I stared at him, my mind trying to process this. A movie? It had sounded so real. The voices, the thud. "A movie?" I repeated dumbly. "Yeah, it was this scene, a really brutal fight. Looking back, it was probably in poor taste to have it on so late. I'm really sorry if it bothered you. It won't happen again." He looked so genuinely apologetic, so reasonable. I felt my convictions start to crumble. Was it possible? Did I just mishear? "Oh," I said. "Okay, no, it's fine. It sounded really real." He gave me a soft, reassuring look, the kind a doctor gives a worried patient. "I get it. This new building, the acoustics are weird, right? And moving is so stressful. It can really put you on edge." He was dismissing my fear, but he was doing it so nicely, so professionally, that I felt like an idiot for even bringing it up. I mumbled an apology and retreated back into my apartment, my face burning with embarrassment. But I couldn't shake it. That sound, the scream, the thud. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. I never saw Sarah. I'd seen her a few times before, a pretty brunette, coming and going with Julian. Now, nothing. His car was in the garage, but hers wasn't. I told myself she'd left him after the fight. That's what normal people do. Then on Friday, I saw something. I was taking my trash down to the chute at the end of the hall, and as I passed Julian's door, I smelled it. A faint but unmistakable chemical smell. Bleach. A lot of it. My blood ran cold. That weekend, I was watering my new ficus tree when I saw it, tangled in the leaves near the bottom. A single silver earring with a small blue stone. I recognized it. I had seen Sarah wear it. It must have fallen off when Julian helped me with the plant. My hands started shaking again. This wasn't right. The smell, the earring, the silence. I called my best friend Amy and told her everything. "Chloe, honey," she said, her voice laced with concern. "Don't you think you're getting a little carried away? He's a doctor. He probably used bleach to clean something, and she could have lost the earring any time. You sound really paranoid." Paranoid? There was that word again. The final straw was the rug. The following week, I saw a cleaning service van parked outside. Later that day, I saw two men hauling a large, rolled-up carpet out of Julian's apartment. It was the area rug from his living room. A few hours later, a delivery truck brought a brand new one. That was it. I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. I called the non-emergency police line and requested a wellness check on Sarah. I gave them her name, which I'd overheard Julian say once, and explained my concerns. An hour later, two officers knocked on my door. I explained the whole story, the fight, the thud, the bleach, the rug. They listened patiently, then went next door. I watched through my peephole as Julian answered. He was the picture of calm cooperation. He invited them in. They were in there for maybe 15 minutes. When they came out, Julian was with them, looking concerned. He pointed at my door and said something to the officers. One of them, a weary-looking man in his 50s, then knocked on my door again. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat. "We spoke with Dr. Collins. He also spoke with his ex-girlfriend Sarah on the phone in front of us. She's fine. She's visiting her parents in Oregon. They had a bad breakup, and he's getting rid of some things that reminded him of her, including the rug she picked out." He sighed. "He also mentioned you seemed very anxious and stressed lately. Ma'am, are you getting enough sleep?" I just stood there, speechless. He'd had an answer for everything. An airtight, logical answer. He had even produced her on the phone. How? Was it really her? Or a friend playing along? The look the cop gave me made me feel small and crazy. I was the hysterical woman in 4B, the paranoid neighbor. They left, and a moment later, I got a text. It was from Julian. "Hey, I'm so sorry you were worried enough to call the police. Breakups are messy. If you ever want to talk, my door is always open." My blood turned to ice. It wasn't an apology. It was a threat. It was a demonstration of his power. He could talk his way out of anything. He could make me look like the crazy one. And he was enjoying it. The next few weeks were a living hell. He doubled down on the friendly neighbor act, but it was laced with something sinister now. He'd knock on my door to offer me leftovers. He'd leave a coffee for me outside my door in the morning. He was always there, watching, checking in on me. Every interaction was a subtle reminder that he was in control, that he had won. He was a pillar of the community, and I was the unhinged woman next door. My paranoia, as everyone called it, got worse. I stopped sleeping. I lost weight. Amy begged me to see a therapist. I started to wonder if they were right. Was I making this all up? Had the stress of the move finally broken something inside me? I was about to give up, to break my lease and just run. But then, I got my chance. Julian called me one afternoon. "Chloe," he said, his voice sounding genuinely frantic. "I'm so sorry to ask, but I'm stuck at the hospital, a massive pileup on the interstate, and I have a plant service coming to water the things Sarah left behind. I completely forgot. Could you possibly let them in for me? The spare key is under the mat." My heart started pounding. His apartment. I could finally see for myself. I agreed, my voice trembling. I waited until the plant service had come and gone. Then, with my heart in my throat, I used the key and let myself into faraway. It was immaculate, spotless. The new rug looked perfect. There was nothing out of place. I felt a wave of defeat. He was right. I was crazy. I was about to leave when I noticed it. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. He'd told the cops they'd broken up. Why would he have a cleaning service for her plants? Why would they be in the bedroom? I pushed the door open. My eyes scanned the room. Bed, dresser, closet, normal. Then I looked at the wall we shared. Behind the headboard, low to the ground, I saw it. A patch of new paint. It was almost a perfect match, but the light from the window hit it at just the right angle, and I could see the subtle difference in texture. And at the very bottom of the new paint, near the baseboard, was a tiny dark reddish-brown fleck, something the new paint hadn't quite covered. I crept closer, my whole body shaking. I knew what it was. I didn't need a lab to tell me. And that's when I heard the jingle of keys at the front door. I dove into the closet, pulling the door shut just as he walked in. I heard him sigh. "Such a drama queen," he mumbled to himself. He wasn't on the phone. He was just talking. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. My blood froze. It was from him. Forgot my wallet. Be right back. There was no pileup. There was no emergency. It was a trap. He knew I would snoop. He wanted me to. I heard him walk into the bedroom. He stopped. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't see the closet door was ajar. "You know," he said, his voice calm and conversational, directed right at the closet. The problem with Sarah was that she didn't appreciate logic. She was all messy emotion. When our relationship had run its course, she refused to accept it. She made a scene. He took a step closer to the closet. So I had to end the scene. It was the only logical solution. The thud you heard? That was her head hitting the wall. Right where the new paint is. Surprisingly effective. Tears were streaming down my face. I was trapped. I was going to die. The real fun, though, he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, was you, Chloe. It was a fascinating little experiment. How easy is it to make a perfectly sane person believe they're insane? Turns out, it's remarkably easy. All it takes is a little confidence, a plausible story, and a world that's all too willing to dismiss a woman's intuition as hysteria. I could hear him right outside the door now. I could smell his cologne. But now the experiment is over, he said softly. And just like with Sarah, there's a loose end, a complication. And you know what I do with complications, he chuckled. It was a low, awful sound. The best part is, no one will even look for you. I've spent the last month telling everyone, the police, the doorman, your friend Amy, how worried I am about you, how you've been unstable, paranoid, talking about running away. When you disappear, they won't see a crime. They'll see a tragedy. The poor, troubled girl from 4B who just couldn't handle the pressure. The doorknob began to turn. "Don't worry," he whispered, as the door slowly swung open, revealing his smiling, perfect face. "I'll be sure to tell everyone how much I miss my crazy neighbor." Every couple has a picture in their mind of the place you bring your first baby home to, the place where you'll mark your kids' heights on a doorframe and host Thanksgiving for 20 years. For my husband Mark and me, that place was 142 Snapdragon Court. It was perfect. A 2-story blue colonial at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, with a big oak tree in the front yard and a porch swing that was just begging for lazy summer evenings. After years of trying, of doctor's appointments and quiet disappointments, we were finally, officially, expecting. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was the foundation for the life we'd fought so hard to build. The neighborhood Stillwater Creek was just as perfect. Manicured lawns, kids riding bikes, the whole 9 yards. It felt safe. It felt like home. Our next-door neighbors were the Walkers. And if our house was the foundation of a dream, theirs was the finished product. Their lawn was a carpet of impossible green. Their flower beds were immaculate. David and Carol Walker were in their late 30s, just like us. They were attractive, friendly, and had 2 children. A pair of twins, a boy and a girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. We met them the day we moved in. Carol brought over a basket of muffins, and David offered to help Mark with a heavy sofa. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Carol said with a bright, warm smile. "We're so glad to have you." And then she called her children over. "Eli, Alara, come say hi to our new neighbors." The front door opened, and the 2 children stepped out onto their porch. They were pristine, dressed in matching khaki shorts and white polo shirts, their blonde hair combed perfectly. They walked in perfect sync, side by side, and stopped at the edge of their lawn. They didn't smile. They didn't wave. They just stood there, their pale blue eyes fixed on me. They were identical in their stillness, like 2 beautiful porcelain dolls. "They're a little shy," David said with a slightly strained laugh. "They're beautiful," I said, trying to fill the awkward silence. The twins didn't respond. They just watched. Their gaze was so direct, so unblinking, it felt less like shyness and more like assessment. After a moment that stretched on for too long, they turned in unison, like a synchronized swimming pair, and walked back inside. The screen door clicked shut behind them. "Well," Mark said, breaking the tension, "thanks so much for the muffins." As we settled in over the next few weeks, I came to realize that the twins' behavior that first day wasn't an anomaly. It was their default state. I never saw them run or shout. I never saw them playing with toys in their yard. Their swing set sat motionless, its chains slowly rusting. Most days, if I glanced out my kitchen window, I would see them, standing in the large picture window of their living room, side by side, watching our house, sometimes for hours. "It's a little creepy, isn't it?" I said to Mark one evening as I pulled the curtains shut. He was focused on assembling a crib and just shrugged. "They're quiet kids. Honestly, Sarah, it's better than having two little monsters screaming and kicking a soccer ball against our fence all day." We hit the neighbor jackpot. I tried to believe him. I really did. I told myself I was just being overly sensitive, my pregnancy hormones making me anxious. But the feeling of being watched never went away. It was a constant, low-grade hum of unease. The parents, David and Carol, were always friendly, but in a frantic, surface-level way. Their smiles seemed painted on, and their eyes held a perpetual, deep-seated exhaustion. Whenever I tried to make conversation with Carol over the fence, she'd keep her answers short, her eyes constantly darting back to her own house, as if expecting a fire to break out. The one time I mentioned the twins, saying something like, "Eli and Ilara are so well behaved," her smile faltered. Her hand trembled as she snipped a rose from its bush. "We do our best," she'd said, her voice barely a whisper, before making a hasty excuse and disappearing inside. The first truly bizarre incident happened a month after we moved in. I was on our back deck, reading a book, enjoying the afternoon sun. I had my feet up, and I was unconsciously rubbing my swollen belly, a habit I developed. I happened to look up at the Walker's house, and there they were, in their upstairs bedroom window. Eli and Ilara, standing shoulder to shoulder, and they were both mimicking my exact motion, their small hands rubbing their flat stomachs in a slow, circular pattern, their eyes locked directly on mine. I felt a jolt of ice-cold dread. It wasn't a coincidence. They were copying me. I snatched my hand away from my stomach, and in perfect unison, they dropped their hands to their sides. I stood up quickly, my heart hammering, and practically ran back inside, locking the door behind me. When I told Mark, he tried to rationalize it. "They're kids, Sarah. Kids are weird. They're probably just fascinated by the baby." But his voice lacked conviction. Even he couldn't explain the perfect, chilling synchronicity of it. That was when the facade of our perfect neighborhood began to crack. My unease grew into a quiet, gnawing fear. I started noticing other things. The Walkers never had visitors. No family, no friends, no other kids coming over for playdates. Their garbage cans were always half empty. Late at night, I would sometimes see David, a silhouette in their backyard, just walking the perimeter of their property, over and over, like a sentry on patrol. The breaking point came on a Saturday in late September. I had been baking a nervous habit and had a whole tray of chocolate chip cookies cooling on the counter. I saw Eli and Ilara standing at the edge of our property line, right where our lawn met theirs. They weren't in a window this time. They were just there, motionless, watching me through the kitchen window. A wave of what I can only describe as maternal duty washed over me. They were just kids, I told myself. Lonely, strange kids. Maybe all they needed was a small act of kindness. So I put 2 of the warmest cookies on a plate, took a deep breath, and walked outside. "Hi there," I said, forcing a cheerful smile. "I made cookies. Would you too like one?" They just stared at me with those pale, empty eyes. I knelt down slowly, so I was at their level, and held out the plate. "They're still warm," I coaxed. After a long moment, Eli, the boy, slowly extended his hand and took a cookie. He didn't eat it. He just held it in his palm, studying it. Ilara didn't move. She was looking at my stomach. Then she spoke. It was the first time I had ever heard her voice. It wasn't the voice of a child. It was flat, toneless, and seemed to vibrate with an ancient weariness. "The ones before you," she said, her eyes never leaving my belly, "gave us sweeter things when their houses were full." Before I could even process the chilling, nonsensical words, Carol came sprinting out of their house. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. "No!" she screamed, a raw, ragged sound. She grabbed both children by their arms, her fingers digging into their flesh. Eli dropped the cookie onto the grass. "I am so sorry," she gasped, looking at me, her eyes wild with panic. She started pulling them back towards her house. "They're not supposed to." "They don't. I'm so sorry." She practically threw them inside and slammed the door. I was left kneeling on my lawn, my heart threatening to beat its way out of my chest, staring at the perfect, uneaten cookie lying in the grass. That night, Mark couldn't deny it anymore. He saw the terror in my eyes. He held me as I cried, agreeing that something was profoundly wrong next door. We decided we would talk to them together in the morning, demand an explanation. But we never got the chance. Around midnight, a frantic scratching knock came at our back door. Mark and I both shot up in bed. He grabbed the baseball bat we keep by the nightstand, and we crept downstairs. Through the small window in the door, I could see a figure. It was Carol. I opened the door, and she practically fell inside, slamming it shut behind her and fumbling with the lock. She was a mess. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes were rumpled, and she was shaking uncontrollably. Tears were streaming down her face. "You have to listen to me," she whispered, her voice a hysterical rasp. "You have to leave tonight. Pack a bag and go. Don't wait for morning." "Carol, what is going on?" Mark demanded, still holding the bat. "What did your daughter mean today?" Carol let out a choked sob. "They're not my children," she whispered, her eyes wide and haunted. "David and I, we can't have kids. We bought this house 5 years ago. They were already here." I just stared at her, my mind refusing to compute. "What are you talking about? Where are their real parents?" She shook her head, a gesture of utter despair. "You don't understand. There are no parents. They are not children. They are something else, something old. They live in that house, and they require a family to take care of them, to maintain the appearance. The family before us, ... they got to leave. That was the deal. They found replacements." Her eyes locked on mine, and a terrible understanding dawned. "They found us." Mark lowered the bat. "This is insane." "Is it?" she hissed. "Have you ever seen them eat? Or sleep? Have you ever heard them laugh? They just watch, and they wait. They feed on harmony, on the idea of a perfect family, on potential, and they get bored." Her gaze dropped to my stomach again, and her voice fell to a terrified whisper. "They haven't had a new playmate in a very long time. They're getting bored of us. Today, when you offered them the cookie, you invited them to notice you. Now they want to play." Suddenly, all the lights in her house next door flickered on at once, bathing our backyard in a sterile, white light. Carol flinched as if she'd been struck. "Oh God," she whimpered. "They know I'm gone. They don't like it when we break the rules." She backed away from us, towards the door. "It's too late. They've invited you." "What invitation?" I asked, my voice trembling. She just pointed a shaky finger towards our front door before she slipped back out into the night and scurried back to her house, a prisoner returning to her cell. Mark and I crept to our living room window. There, on our front porch, tucked neatly under the welcome mat, was a small white envelope. My blood ran cold. We didn't get it. We locked all the doors, turned off all the lights, and huddled together in our bedroom. Mark now clutching the bat with white knuckles. We didn't sleep. We just listened to the silence. The next evening, just as the sun began to set, our doorbell rang. A single, polite chime. We didn't answer. It rang again and again. On the fourth ring, a small, flat voice, Ilara's voice, drifted through the thick wood of the door as if it were paper. We know you're home. It's not polite to ignore your hosts. Then, a second voice, Eli's. Mommy and Daddy say you have to come play. It's the rule. And then, to our absolute horror, we heard the sound of our front door unlocking. A slow metallic click. We hadn't lost a key. It was just opening. We were trapped. We ran to the back door, but it was the same story. We heard the deadbolt slide open on its own. Every exit was compromised. There was nowhere to run. With no other choice, we walked slowly, numb with terror, into our living room. Eli and Ilara were standing in the foyer. Behind them, in the open doorway, stood David and Carl. Their faces were ashen, their eyes hollow. They looked like hostages. "It's time to play," the twins said in perfect, chilling unison. We were herded like sheep across the lawn to their house. The inside was cold and sterile, like a museum exhibit of a perfect home. David and Carol sat down on the sofa, their movements stiff and robotic, and folded their hands in their laps. They stared at a blank television screen. "Welcome to the family," Eli said, his lips barely moving. "The game is very simple," Ilara continued, her voice echoing her brother's. "You will sit with us now. You will be the new mommy and daddy." I started to sob. "What do you want from us?" "We want you to be happy," they said together. "We want you to build your perfect life. Here with us, you will smile. You will be kind. You will maintain the house. And you will wait for new neighbors to arrive. And if we don't?" Mark asked, his voice shaking with a rage born of pure terror. The twins both turned their heads slowly to look at him. For the first time, their blank expressions changed. A slow, cold smile spread across their identical faces. A smile that didn't reach their ancient, empty eyes. "We get bored," they chirped in unison. "And you don't want us to get bored?" And so that's where we are now, sitting on a perfect sofa, in a perfect house, in a perfect neighborhood. Mark and I sit here, a forced, rigid smile plastered on my face, my hand resting on the baby that will soon be born into this game. David and Carol are gone. They were allowed to leave this morning, their faces a mixture of guilt and profound, ecstatic relief. They got to leave. They found replacements. Across the room, Eli and Ilara are standing at the picture window. They aren't looking at us anymore. They're looking out, past our old house, to the one next to it. The one with the "for sale" sign that just went up this morning. They are watching, and they are waiting, patiently, for the next new family to arrive, for the next players to join their permanent, endless game. You know, it's funny how you can think you're in control of your life. You make plans. You set goals. You imagine this whole future laid out in front of you like a roadmap. My roadmap was simple. Get a decent job, save up for a down payment, and get the hell out of my shoebox apartment in the city. I was 26, working a dead-end graphic design job, and my biggest ambition was to one day own a lawnmower. Pathetic, I know, but it was mine. Then I got the call. My grandmother, Eleanor, had passed away. To be honest, I barely knew her. My mom had a falling out with her years before I was born. Something about my grandfather and the old ways, whatever that meant. We'd get a Christmas card every year with a crisp $20 bill inside, but that was it. I knew she lived in this tiny, forgotten town in rural Pennsylvania called Havenwood. That was the extent of my knowledge. Her lawyer called me a week later. Turns out, she'd left me everything, the sole beneficiary, which sounded great until he clarified that everything consisted of her house and about $3,000 in a savings account. Still, a house is a house. My roadmap suddenly had a massive, unexpected shortcut. So I packed up my life, gave my landlord notice, and drove 6 hours into the deep green heart of nowhere. The town of Havenwood was quaint. That's the polite word for it. It was one of those places where time seemed to have gotten a flat tire back in the 1970s and just decided to stay put. The house itself was at the end of a long, quiet street, set back from the road and flanked by overgrown oak trees. It was a 2-story colonial that had probably been beautiful once, but was now in a state of what I'd call managed decay. The paint was peeling like a bad sunburn, shutters hung at odd angles, and the whole property was being slowly reclaimed by nature. I was standing there on the sidewalk, key in my hand, feeling this mix of excitement and overwhelming dread when I heard a voice. "Quite the project, isn't she?" I turned to see an old man standing on the porch of the house next door. He was wiry and tall, probably in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd spent a lot of time outdoors. He was holding a watering can. Yeah, you could say that," I replied, trying for a friendly smile. He ambled over, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Arthur Abernathy?" he said, extending a hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. "Lived next to your grandmother for 40 years. A good woman, Eleanor. Kept to herself, but a good woman." "Alex," I said. "Her grandson. Nice to meet you. The spitting image of your grandfather you are," he said, his eyes crinkling. "Well, if you need anything, son, a tool, a bit of advice, you just give a holler. I've seen every repair this old house has ever needed." And that was how I met Mr. Abernathy. For the first few weeks, he was a godsend. He really did seem to know the house better than I did. He showed me where the main water shutoff was hidden behind a loose brick in the basement, told me which floorboards groaned the loudest, and lent me every tool I could possibly need. He was the perfect neighbor, always ready with a cold lemonade and a story about the town's history. The house was worse inside than it looked. There was a damp, musty smell that clung to everything. The wallpaper was stained and peeling, revealing patches of dark, almost black plaster underneath. But I was determined. This was my house now. My project. The weirdness started subtly. It was about a month in. I was scraping the old, cracked paint off the front door, planning to go with a nice, modern slate gray. Mr. Abernathy came over, carrying a plate of cookies his wife, he said, had baked before she passed. "Good to see you breathing some new life into the place, Alex," he said, watching me work. "What color are you thinking for the door?" "Probably a dark gray," I said. "Something clean." He got this strange look on his face. He set the cookies down on the porch railing. "Gray, you say? You know, Eleanor always kept it red. A deep barn red. Her mother before her, too. They always said a red door keeps the house warm inside." It seemed like an odd thing to say, but I just chalked it up to small-town tradition. "Yeah? Well, I think it's time for a change." He just stood there for a second, not smiling. "Some things," he said softly, "aren't meant to change. A house this old has habits. It's best to respect them." He then smiled, patted me on the shoulder, and told me to enjoy the cookies. The interaction left a weird taste in my mouth, and it wasn't from the oatmeal raisin. A week later, I was in the basement. It was the worst part of the house. Cold, damp, and labyrinthine, with a dirt floor in one section and crumbling stone walls. In the far corner, tucked away behind an old furnace, was a tiny, grimy window, no bigger than a shoebox, set right at ground level. It was cracked and let in a constant, chilly draft. My plan was to brick it up. It was useless and a clear security risk. I was measuring the space when Mr. Abernathy called my name from the top of the basement stairs. It nearly made me jump out of my skin. I hadn't even heard him come in. "Just checking on you," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Brought you a sandwich." "Thanks, Mr. Abernathy, but you don't have to do that." He made his way down the rickety wooden stairs, his eyes scanning the basement. "This was always Eleanor's least favorite room," he said, his gaze landing on the small window. "What are you up to over there?" "Oh, this thing," I said, tapping the frame. "It's cracked and drafty. I'm gonna brick it up tomorrow. Seal it for good." The friendly old man act vanished. It was like a mask dropped. His face went pale, and his eyes were wide with something I could only describe as alarm. "No," he said, his voice sharp. "You can't do that." I laughed, a little nervously. "Why not?" "It's pointless. It's a breathing hole," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He took a step closer. "Every house needs to breathe. That window, it lets the pressure out. You seal that window, Alex, and this whole house will sour. It'll turn on you." I just stared at him. He was dead serious. He looked genuinely terrified. It's just a window, Mr. Abernathy. Please," he said, and the desperation in his voice was chilling. "Just leave it be. Put some new putty on it if you must. But don't you ever seal it. Your grandmother understood that. It's the most important rule of this house." He didn't stay for long after that. He just left the sandwich on a dusty crate and scurried back up the stairs. I stood there for a long time, the cold air from the cracked window seeping into my bones. For the first time, I felt a real creeping fear. This wasn't just small-town eccentricity. This was something else. And that's when I started to notice things. It started with sounds. At night, I'd hear scratching noises, not the scuttling of mice or squirrels. This was a slow, deliberate drag, like fingernails being pulled across the old plaster walls in the hallway. I'd get up, flip on the lights, and there would be nothing there. Then there were the whispers. Faint, like the tail end of a conversation coming from another room. I'd hold my breath and listen, but it would always be gone, leaving only the sound of my own heart hammering in my chest. I tried to rationalize it. It's an old house. Old houses make noise. The wind, the pipes, the foundation settling. But it didn't feel like that. It felt intentional. Mr. Abernathy's advice got stranger. He told me I needed to hang mirrors on the walls at either end of the upstairs hallway, facing each other directly. "It confuses the shadows," he'd explain, matter-of-factly. He told me to pour a line of salt along the threshold of the back door once a month, to keep out unwelcome things. He insisted I never leave the attic door unlocked at night. I felt like I was losing my mind. Part of me, the logical part, knew this was all superstitious nonsense. But the other part, the part that lay awake listening to the scratching in the walls, was terrified to disobey. So I did it. I bought the mirrors. I poured the salt. I locked the attic door every single night. I even painted the front door red. I felt like a fool doing it, but the fear was a stronger motivator than my pride. And for a while, things seemed to quiet down. The scratching stopped. The whispers faded. I started to think maybe the old man was right. Maybe the house did have its habits, its rules. As long as I followed them, I was safe. I was living in a fragile, bizarre truce with my own home. The truce ended last Tuesday. I got a call from my mom. It was the first time we'd spoken in weeks. She was asking how the house was, and I made the mistake of mentioning Mr. Abernathy and his quirks. Her voice went cold. Alex, what did you say his name was? Abernathy. Arthur Abernathy. Why? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Alex, she said, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't place. Stay away from him. He isn't who you think he is. What are you talking about? He's been nothing but helpful. He was there when I was a little girl, she said. He looked exactly the same then as he does on the town's website now. Old. He was old 50 years ago, Alex. She paused. Your grandfather hated him. He said Abernathy was a keeper, a warden. He said our family wasn't living in the house. We were living for it. That's why we left. Your grandfather was trying to get me away from that house and from him. After I hung up, my blood ran cold. It didn't make any sense. How could he not have aged? But my mom wasn't one to lie about something like that. That night, my frustration and fear boiled over into anger. I was done playing by these insane rules. Done being scared in my own home. I was going to take it back. And I knew just where to start. With a hammer and a bag of cement, I went down into the basement. My hands were shaking, but I was filled with a defiant energy. I walked over to that small, cracked window, the breathing hole. No more, I said to the empty room. I took the hammer and I shattered the rest of the glass. The sound was explosive in the silence. A gust of foul-smelling, cold air rushed in, like the house was exhaling something rotten. I didn't hesitate. I started mixing the cement, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I slapped the wet cement into the opening, brick by brick, until the last sliver of gray evening light was gone. It was sealed, done. I felt a surge of triumph. It was just a window. See? Just a damn window. I went upstairs, feeling lighter than I had in months. I made dinner, watched some TV. For the first time, the house felt truly silent, peaceful even. I fell asleep on the couch, feeling proud, feeling free. The sound that woke me was not a scratch or a whisper. It was a roar. A deep, guttural roar of fury that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. It came from everywhere at once, from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. I shot up from the couch, my entire body trembling. The air had turned frigid, and the musty smell from the basement was now a thick, suffocating stench of decay and damp earth. Then came the banging, not on the door, but from inside the walls. It was frantic and violent, like a giant beast was trapped and trying to smash its way out. The picture frames on the walls rattled and crashed to the floor. The mirrors I had hung in the upstairs hallway shattered simultaneously, the sound of it like a gunshot. I was paralyzed with a terror so pure and absolute, it felt like my heart had stopped. The thing in the house was awake, and it was furious. By sealing the window, I hadn't locked it out. I had locked myself in with it. My mind screamed one word: Abernathy. I scrambled for the front door, the red door, fumbling with the lock as the banging in the walls grew louder, closer. It sounded like it was coming down the stairs. I ripped the door open and sprinted out into the night, not even bothering to close it behind me. I ran across my lawn to his house and started pounding on his door, screaming his name. Mr. Abernathy, help me, please. Lights flickered on. The door opened, and he stood there, not in pajamas, but fully dressed in his usual trousers and button-up shirt, as if he'd been waiting. His face held no surprise, no concern, only a look of profound, weary disappointment. You foolish boy, he said, his voice cold as a tombstone. What did you do? The window, I gasped, out of breath. I sealed the window. The house, what's happening? He sighed, a long, mournful sound. He looked past me, at my house. The lights inside were flickering wildly, and I could hear a low, constant groaning sound, like the tormented soul of the house itself. I told you, he said, his voice flat. It needs to breathe. It gets agitated when it can't. He looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw the true age in his eyes. It was an ancient, chilling emptiness. Your grandmother understood. She fed it. She kept it calm. A little bit of salt, a few mirrors. A song hummed in the attic now and then. Small offerings. Small prices to pay to keep it dormant. My mind was reeling, trying to process his words. Fed it? Fed it what? What is it? A slow, terrible smile spread across his face. It's the house, Alex, or what lives in the house. It's been here a long time. My family has watched over it for generations. We make sure it stays happy. We bring it new caretakers when the old ones pass on. The pieces clicked into place, each one colder and more horrific than the last. My inheritance. The old ways, my mom mentioned. His immediate appearance when I arrived. The rules. You knew this would happen, I stammered. You led me into this. I tried to guide you, he corrected me, his tone hardening. I tried to make the transition easy. Your family built this house. Your blood is tied to it. It was always meant to be your responsibility, your inheritance. You were supposed to be its keeper, but you broke the rules. And now, he shook his head slowly. Now it's hungry, and it has been woken up improperly. Behind me, from my open front door, a shape began to emerge. It was a darkness, blacker than the night around it, a shifting, amorphous shadow that seemed to suck the very light out of the air. It unfolded itself from the doorway, a thing of pure malice, and the low groan intensified into a high-pitched, piercing shriek that vibrated in my teeth. I turned to run, but Abernathy grabbed my arm. His grip was like iron. No, he said, his voice a low command. You don't get to run. This is your house now, your duty. You have to put it back to sleep. How? I screamed, my eyes locked on the advancing darkness. He looked at me, his face devoid of all humanity, all neighborly kindness. It needs a better offering now, he whispered. Something more than salt and whispers. It needs a promise. It needs a sacrifice to quiet it down for another generation. He let go of my arm and took a deliberate step back, retreating onto his own porch. He was abandoning me. He was watching, just as he must have watched my grandmother and her mother before her. A warden, my mom had called him. The shadow was on my lawn now, sliding across the grass, killing every blade it touched. The shrieking was inside my head. I was trapped between the monster from my own home and the human monster who had orchestrated it all. My roadmap was gone. My future was gone. All that was left was the red door hanging open behind the encroaching dark and the chilling, patient gaze of my neighbor waiting for me to pay the price of my inheritance. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.